What if everything you thought you knew about America's past was wrong? Long before Columbus set foot on these shores, before the stories that fill our school books were even imagined, there existed a world. Hidden civilizations, vast migrations, and forgotten empires that would shape the continent for thousands of years. This isn't a myth. This is real history, buried beneath time, waiting to be unearthed. Picture the world over 20,000 years ago. The Ice Age grips the planet in a frozen fist. Enormous glaciers blanket much of the northern hemisphere, locking up so much water that sea levels drop by hundreds of feet. Entire continents look different, and in the far north, a land bridge, Beringia, emerges between Siberia and Alaska. It's not a narrow strip of rock. It's a vast, cold, wind-swept grassland teeming with mammoths, bison, and predators that would make modern apex hunters look like amateurs. For thousands of years, this place isn't a bridge. It's a world of its own. Somewhere in Siberia, small groups of humans follow the herds. These people don't know they're about to change history. They don't have maps. They don't have a grand plan. They follow survival, the rhythm of migration, the pull of game, the whisper of opportunity. Perhaps they see more herds moving east. Perhaps climate pressures or competition from other tribes force them onward. Maybe curiosity does. Humans have always chased horizons. And beyond that icy horizon lies an entire hemisphere, untouched by humankind. Crossing into Beringia isn't a single event. It's generations of movement. Families follow herds. Children grow up never knowing their ancestors lived on the other side. And as the climate warms slightly, corridors of land open up through the glaciers, beckoning these travelers deeper into a new world. Imagine standing in their boots, fur-lined, primitive, yet functional, looking out over an endless expanse of unknown land. No cities, no roads, no other humans. Just forests, rivers, towering mountains, and the distant roar of glaciers cracking. Why did they go? Some historians argue it wasn't really a decision at all. Migration was life. Following food was survival. If the herds moved east, you moved east. Others suggest environmental shifts, perhaps drops or cold snaps, pushed populations gradually like dominoes. One group after another over centuries spilling across the land bridge. Slowly, imperceptibly, humans flowed into the Americas like water filling an empty basin. By around 16,000 years ago, some groups have moved south of the glaciers. They spread across a continent untouched by human feet. Think about that for a second. Every tree, every valley, every river has never heard human voices. It's like stepping onto an alien planet. But these aren't explorers in spacesuits. They're hunters, toolmakers, fire keepers. And they bring with them a culture, oral traditions, and knowledge honed over tens of thousands of years in Ice Age Eurasia. As they move further, they adapt. The megafauna of the Americas, giant sloths, saber-toothed cats, mastodons, are unlike anything they've ever hunted. The terrain changes dramatically. Harsh tundra gives way to rich plains, dense forests, and eventually arid deserts and lush tropics. Over centuries, these groups fragment, diversify, and evolve. Cultures form around rivers, mountains, and coasts. Languages branch out like living organisms. These early peoples aren't simply wandering tribes. They are the seeds of civilizations that will one day raise monumental cities, build trade networks thousands of miles long, and develop spiritual systems as complex as anything in the old world. But for now, the story is migration slow, relentless, transformative. The Ice Age tightens, then recedes. Sea levels rise again, swallowing Beringia and cutting off the Americas from Asia. Those who crossed are now isolated, their destinies tied to this vast new land. No more back and forth. No more reinforcement from the old world. These are the first Americans, and their journey has only just begun. Somewhere on the plains, a family sets up camp near a river. Sparks leap from a fire into the cold night air. Children sleep under hides. Hunters sharpen stone points. listening to the distant cries of animals in the darkness. They don't know it, but their descendants will spread to the tip of South America, build temples, engineer massive earthworks, and leave behind mysteries that will puzzle archaeologists millennia later. Their first step onto this continent is the opening act of one of history's greatest, least told sagas. And that's where the story truly begins. Centuries turn into millennia. Those early families who crossed frozen land bridges and wandered through uncharted forests have become something more. Their descendants spread across a landscape so vast it takes your breath away just to imagine it. From the icy north to the humid jungles of Central America, from the Great Plains to the towering Andes, they become nations, builders, dreamers. They shape rivers, carve mountains, and raise cities that rival anything found in the ancient Old World. But for most Americans today, these worlds are ghosts barely mentioned in textbooks. And that is astonishing. Let's begin in the East, in a place that would one day become the United States. Thousands of years before the first English colony was even an idea, entire communities were constructing monumental earthworks, massive mounds rising from the landscape like silent sentinels. Places like Poverty Point in modern Louisiana. Built around 500 years ago, this site wasn't just a campfire gathering. It was a vast ceremonial center with engineered ridges arranged in perfect geometric patterns spanning hundreds of acres. Thousands of people coordinated to build it, moving millions of baskets of soil. No stone pyramids here, no flashy monuments, just earth, shaped with precision and vision. The people who made this weren't primitive wanderers. They were organized, skilled, and they understood how to mobilize entire populations toward a shared goal. As time rolls forward, cultures rise and fall like tides. In the Ohio River Valley, the Adena and Hopewell cultures emerge, brilliant societies that create vast networks stretching hundreds, even thousands of miles. Artifacts from the Great Lakes appear in Florida. Copper from the north, shells from the Gulf, obsidian from the Rockies, all traded across the continent long before the first European ship crossed the Atlantic. Imagine standing on a bluff overlooking a massive mound complex as smoke from distant fires curls into the evening sky. Hundreds of miles away, another community looks up at the same stars, knowing that somewhere out there, trading partners and spiritual allies exist, connected through rivers and trails. North America wasn't isolated pockets of people. It was a living, breathing web of cultures exchanging goods, ideas, and beliefs over vast distances. Then, around 1,000 years ago, something extraordinary happens in the Mississippi Valley. A city rises. Cahokia. At its height, it is home to perhaps 20,000 people, making it larger than London at the same time. In the middle of the continent, a bustling metropolis appears, filled with plazas, temples, neighborhoods, and monumental mounds that dominate the skyline. Monk's Mound, the largest of them, is as tall as a 10-story building and covers more ground than the Great Pyramid at Giza. And this wasn't a random collection of huts. Archaeology reveals urban planning, social stratification, religious centers, and intricate political systems. Imagine the sound of drums echoing through the air, traders arriving by canoe along the Mississippi, crowds gathering for ceremonies under the blazing summer sun. This was a city built by Indigenous Americans, thriving centuries before Columbus was even born. Farther south, in the jungles and mountains of Central America, other civilizations flourish. The Olmecs, the so-called mother culture of Mesoamerica, leave behind colossal stone heads that stare silently across centuries. The Maya rise with breathtaking achievements in astronomy, mathematics, and architecture. They build towering cities like Tikal and Palenque, carve intricate hieroglyphics into stone, and develop calendars so precise that modern scientists still marvel at them. While Europe struggles through the early medieval period, Maya astronomers are charting Venus cycles with astonishing accuracy. Priests conduct complex rituals timed to celestial movements, and architects raise pyramids that pierce the jungle canopy. Then the Toltecs. Then the Aztecs. Each culture building upon the foundations of the last, blending warfare, trade, religion, and innovation into civilizations that rival any of the so-called great civilizations of the Old World. Their cities hum with life. Markets crowded with thousands of merchants, streets lined with temples and palaces, causeways stretching across lakes, and aqueducts channeling fresh water into urban centers. Tenochtitlan, the Aztec capital, would one day stun European visitors with its grandeurs, a city of hundreds of thousands, clean, organized, vibrant. And this isn't just a story of the South. Across the continent, remarkable societies bloom. In the deserts of the American Southwest, the ancestral Pueblones construct massive cliff dwellings and sprawling great houses, perfectly aligned with the movements of the sun and stars. At Chaco Canyon, they build roads so straight they cut through solid rock, roads that connect ceremonial centers across hundreds of miles. Their architecture echoes with precision and purpose, their society sophisticated and deeply connected to the landscape. Meanwhile, in the Arctic, Inuit communities master some of the harshest conditions on Earth. Their knowledge of ice, sea, and animal migration is so deep it becomes a science passed down through generations. On the Pacific coast, complex fishing societies thrive, using canoes and technology adapted perfectly to their environment. Everywhere you look on this vast continent, people aren't merely surviving, they're innovating, organizing, and building worlds. This is the part of history that most Americans never hear about. The idea that the Americas were a wild, empty land before Europeans arrived is not only wrong, it's one of the greatest oversimplifications in history. These were not scattered tribes in untouched wilderness. This was a continent full of civilizations with deep histories, rivalries, trade empires, cities, and spiritual traditions that shaped every hill and valley long before European ships appeared on the horizon. And beneath the surface of this grand story, there are mysteries that still defy explanation. What led to the sudden decline of places like Cahokia? Why did some Mesoamerican cities collapse seemingly overnight? Environmental changes, internal strife, overexploitation of resources. We're piecing together fragments, but some questions remain stubbornly unanswered, echoing through time like footsteps fading in the dark. History is never static. Civilizations rise, but they also falter. Somewhere in the centuries before Europeans appear on the horizon, the great cities and networks of the Americas begin to shift, fracture, and, sometimes, vanish. Cahokia, once the beating heart of a continent, declines. The plazas grow quiet. The monumental mounds stand watch over fields slowly reclaimed by nature. Archaeologists debate the cause. Was it environmental stress, deforestation, floods, droughts? Was it political upheaval, internal divisions, or disease? Perhaps it was all of the above. Human stories are rarely simple. The collapse isn't an explosion, it's a slow unraveling. A city of tens of thousands fades into memory, its legacy buried beneath centuries of soil. In Mesoamerica, some cities burn, others are abandoned to the jungle. The Maya experience waves of collapse and reorganization. Their people don't disappear. They transform, scatter, rebuild in new forms. But the towering cities that once commanded the canopy grow silent. In the American Southwest, Chaco Canyon's great houses fall empty. Roads that once carried pilgrims and traders stretch out toward horizons no one travels anymore. It's as if the continent inhales and holds its breath. Then, on distant shores, another story begins to stir. Across the Atlantic in Europe, kingdoms sharpen their ambitions, navigation improves. Empires hunger for new routes, new wealth, new lands. And one day, ships appear on the eastern horizon. When Europeans arrive, they do not step onto a blank slate. They arrive at the tail end of a complex history thousands of years in the making. They encounter nations, confederacies, farmers, warriors, diplomats, astronomers. They walk into a world that has already lived entire ages without them. For many indigenous peoples, that first contact isn't just an introduction. It's the beginning of a storm. Diseases carried invisibly on breath and skin tear through communities faster than any army could. Smallpox, measles, influenza, plagues that old world populations have endured for centuries strike like lightning here. Within decades, entire civilizations are decimated. Imagine a city where 9 out of 10 people vanish in the span of a generation. Fields go untended. Ceremonies stop. Knowledge keepers fall. It's a trauma so immense it echoes through oral histories to this day. European chroniclers later look upon depopulated lands and make a deadly assumption: empty. But they're wrong. These were lands recently silenced, not lands that had always been quiet. Where resistance forms, it's often fierce. Confederacies like the Haudenosaunee, alliances in the southeast, empires like the Aztec and Inca, they do not simply bow to European arrival. They negotiate, they fight, they adapt. Some resist for generations. Some strike back with strategic brilliance that confounds European powers. The history of first contact isn't a single moment, it's a storm of diplomacy, warfare, trade, betrayal, and survival playing out across thousands of miles. In Mexico, the Aztec capital of Tenochtitlan falls after brutal siege, not because it was weak, but because it was caught in a perfect storm. Disease, internal political divisions, and the relentless ambition of conquistadors. Imagine standing on a causeway as smoke billows over a city of hundreds of thousands, temples burning, canals choked with debris. A civilization centuries in the making, brought low in a matter of years. In the north, explorers push along rivers and coastlines, meeting societies as varied and complex as any in Europe. From the mound builders' descendants to powerful coastal nations, every encounter writes a new chapter, often written in blood. And through it all, the memory of what came before lingers, sometimes in oral tradition, sometimes in ruins, sometimes in the silence of forests reclaiming once great centers. Yet this isn't just a story of loss. The civilizations of the Americas didn't simply vanish, they adapted, persisted, and endured. Descendants of those ancient builders, astronomers, farmers, and traders live today. Their languages still flow through conversations, their ceremonies still reach toward the sky, their art still speaks in vibrant color. Modern cities stand atop ancient ones. Roads follow paths first laid down by peoples whose names were forgotten by colonial maps. Every inch of this land carries their imprint. What makes this story so haunting is how close we came to never knowing it. For centuries, the dominant narrative was written by those who arrived late and misunderstood what they saw. But the earth remembers. Mounds rise from plains. Stone temples pierce jungles. Artifacts lie buried, waiting for curious hands to bring them to light. And as we peel back the layers of soil and bias, a richer, more complex picture emerges. A history that belongs to this continent long before foreign sails appeared. This is America's hidden story. It begins not with Columbus, not with Jamestown, not with Plymouth Rock. It begins with families crossing icy bridges into a new world, with builders shaping landscapes into monuments, with astronomers charting the heavens from jungles and deserts. It begins with civilizations rising, flourishing, falling, and enduring. The first peoples of the Americas were not silent shadows in a wilderness. They were actors in one of humanity's grandest dramas. So next time someone tells the story of America as if it began in 1492, remember the millennia that came before. Remember the cities beneath your feet. Remember the civilizations that dreamed, built, traded, and thrived here long before the sails on the horizon. Because to understand America's true history, you have to start at the beginning,